When I was 4 years old, I was held by a human trafficker with the muzzle of a gun pressed to my temple. I didn't struggle or cry. Instead, I painstakingly raised my small hand and touched the gun's body precisely, right on the most critical disassembly pin, the weak point of the entire gun. A pin that should require a tool to remove, but in my perception, there was an incredibly subtle angle. In the next second, my pinky finger gently flicked it, and my palm followed the motion to lift the receiver cover. A soft click echoed. "Do." He felt the gun in her hand suddenly go light, followed by a series of clattering sounds. That tightly constructed submachine gun was dismantled right in her hands. The magazine fell, the barrel separated, a nearby bullet flew right into Doohie's face, and countless components scattered everywhere, leaving only a bare stock in the end. Doohie was completely stunned. "Where's the gun? Where's my gun?" It wasn't just her. Even the elite soldier Mu Huai, across from them, was completely speechless. In less than a second, a one-handed disassembly of a gun, and by a 4-year-old child at that. But just as everyone's brain froze, I didn't stop. I shoved the iron pipe I was hugging into Doohie's face. It was a simple pneumatic cannon I had modified. A dull thud echoed. A puff of white gas shot out from the pipe's opening. A rusty nut carrying a fierce whistling sound slammed into Doohie's left eye. A blood-curdling scream echoed across the Gobi Desert. "Doo." He clutched her eye in pain and fell backward. It was at this moment a cold glint flashed in Mu Huai's eyes. She erupted in an instant like a cheetah, a flying knee straight to Doohie's chest. The sound of breaking bones rang out. Doohie didn't even have time to groan. She was sent flying and knocked unconscious. The remaining henchmen were also pinned to the ground in an instant. The fight ended with unbelievable speed, but Mu Huai didn't care about Doohie on the ground. She panted, suddenly turning around, staring intently at me. I was still hugging that white smoking iron pipe, looking at the pile of components on the ground and the bad guy in a pool of blood. I muttered, "The bad auntie is broken." Then I looked up at Mu Huai walking towards me. The fearsome aura on this tall woman made me instinctively back away, but as the wind blew, carrying the scent of gunpowder mixed with her sweat, I suddenly froze. This scent. I seemed to have smelled it a long time ago. It was very warm, very safe. My suspended heart suddenly calmed down. Her hands were shaking. The scene just now was too shocking, but now there was only one thought in her mind. She had to see this child, even just a glance, just to confirm the suspicion she dared not touch. Mu Huai squatted down. Her voice was hoarse and trembling. "Little one, are you okay?" The deputy captain came over to report, but seeing this scene, he immediately fell silent and tactfully stepped aside. Because he saw that decisive living Yama king, now kneeling on one knee before a grimy little boy. Mu Huai looked at me, this tiny child. I was too thin. My wrist was so small it looked like it would snap. My face was covered in engine oil and dirt. I shrank back, my hands still gripping that iron pipe tightly. "Don't be afraid." Mu Huai took out a piece of compressed biscuit from her pocket, tore the wrapper and handed it over. "Have something to eat." I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My throat made a gulping sound, so I tentatively reached out, my small frostbitten hand. But just as I reached for the biscuit, my wide sleeve slipped down, revealing a red string. Hanging on the string was a shiny golden bullet casing. Mu Huai's pupils contracted to a pinpoint. Her breath completely stopped at this moment. It was a 7.62mm rifle casing, the last bullet she fired when she won the All-Army Championship 3 years ago. On that day, I had just turned 100 days old. She had personally carved the character Mu on the casing, tied it with a red string, and put it on my wrist. She said this bullet would protect me in her stead. Mu Huai's hand suddenly gripped my small hand tightly, the strength frighteningly large, but she tried to restrain it, afraid she would crush my fragile bones. I was startled and wanted to pull my hand back. She held it fast. She tremblingly turned the casing over. Though it was very worn, the crooked character Mu was still clear. Something exploded in Mu Huai's mind. For the past 3 years, she had seen her blood-covered husband in countless nightmares, heard her son's crying calls. She thought she would never see him again in this lifetime, but now, heaven had returned my life to her. Muga. Mu Huai's lips trembled. Her voice was shattered. 2 streams of hot tears from the woman who wouldn't shed a tear even when bleeding immediately gushed out. I had been struggling, but after hearing those 2 words, I suddenly stiffened. In the depths of my memory, the woman who always used her hair-scented cheek to rub against me, the woman who lifted me high up. Mom. My voice was very soft, tinged with uncertain shyness, but this mom was like a clap of thunder. This mom was like a clap of thunder, completely shattering Mu Huai's last psychological defense. It's Mom. Mom is here. Mu Huai suddenly opened her arms wide, hugging me tightly. "I'm sorry. Mom came late." I was stunned for a second, then all the grievances, fear, and hunger of the past 3 years erupted in this moment. I threw away the iron pipe in my hand and buried my face in the crook of my mother's neck, sobbing. "Mom, I want to go home. Someone hit me. It hurts. I miss Dad." My heart-wrenching cries echoed over the desolate Gobi Desert. The fully armed Special Forces soldiers around all had red-rimmed eyes. They silently turned away to wipe their tears. Who could have imagined the living Yama king who killed without batting an eye, the one who faced a hail of bullets without flinching, that iron-willed regiment commander, was now kneeling on the ground, hugging her long-lost, found son, crying like a fool. Just then, the deputy captain pointed to the smashed truck and asked carefully, "Regiment commander, do we still need this truck?" Mu Huai was holding me with one arm, the other clumsily wiping my face. I clung to her, refusing to get down for dear life. But before Mu Huai could speak, Chief Engineer Lao Zhang beside her jumped up. "We need it. Of course we need it. This is a miracle." Lao Zhang's face was flushed with excitement. His hand holding a wrench pointed at the still steaming engine, his speech trembling. "Regiment commander, do you know how absurd this thing is? This is clearly an old diesel engine from the 50s. It should have been scrapped long ago. But look, and here too." Lao Zhang pointed to a few pipes that were reinforced with some scrap iron pieces. "The intake manifold has been modified into a vortex type. The angle of the fuel injector has also been adjusted, although it looks like a dog gnawed on it. This design is even more advanced than our newest tank engine. This damn thing's thermal efficiency has increased by at least 40%. If this were used on our tanks, it could practically fly." The more Lao Zhang spoke, the more excited he got, insisting this was definitely the work of a top-tier enemy mechanical expert. The surrounding soldiers were dumbfounded. To improve performance so much with scrap metal, it was just too absurd. However, only Mu Huai's eyes flickered. She looked down at me in her arms. At this moment, I was staring intently at the wrench in Lao Zhang's hand with great interest. She suddenly recalled the scene of me dismantling the gun earlier. A crazy thought exploded in her mind. Could that top-tier mechanical expert be this child who could barely speak properly? This thought was too insane. Even Mu Huai was startled by it, but she didn't say it out loud. She just calmly said a few words. "Tow it back, along with this pile of scrap metal, and all the components on the ground. Not a single screw is to be left behind. Take everything back to the base. Classify it as special grade top secret." And so the convoy stretched across the Gobi Desert on its way back. In the jeep, the heater was on full blast. Mu Huai opened her water bottle, poured water into the cap and blew on it, then touched it with her lips to test it. After confirming it wasn't hot, she carefully brought it to my mouth. That action was 10,000 times more careful than when she defused bombs. I gulped down a few sips of water, then I reached out my small hand to touch the hard insignia on Mu Huai's collar and complained softly, "Mommy." On Mu Huai's perennially ice-cold face, a silly smile immediately appeared. "Okay, Mom will take this off for you to play with when we get back." But just then, I started fidgeting restlessly, pointing at the Jeep's center console. "Mommy, there's a bug in here." Mu Huai was stunned. "A bug? Where would a bug come from in this cold winter?" But I pointed to a crack behind the dashboard, asserting firmly, "It's in there. Sizzle, sizzle. It's so noisy. It's biting the wires." Mu Huai and the guard looked at each other. This vehicle had just been serviced. How could there be a bug biting the wires? "Stop the car." Although Mu Huai was doubtful, she now had a blind faith in me. The car stopped on the roadside. She took out her tools and pried open the dashboard cover. The next second, the air in the car instantly froze. Deep within a complex mess of wires, the insulation of a main wire had been worn away. The exposed copper wire was touching the metal beam of the chassis. With the vibration of the vehicle, it occasionally sparked with barely visible electric arcs. If left unfixed, after driving for a few more dozen kilometers, this vehicle would very likely spontaneously combust and could even cause the fuel tank to explode. Cold sweat poured down Guard Xiaoli's back. "Regiment Commander, this is a serious safety hazard." Mu Huai took a deep breath. She looked at me in her arms with my innocent face playing with the water bottle cap. Her gaze became extremely complicated. Can dismantle guns, can fix engines, and can even hear a wiring fault through the dashboard. This long-lost son she had found seemed to be no ordinary good boy. "Fix it. Let's keep going." Mu Huai stroked my head, her eyes filled with pride. "We're going home." I nuzzled into her embrace and yawned. "Go home and drink milk." After saying that, I closed my eyes in peace. But in her mind, Mu Huai was already calculating. Does the base's general store have milk powder? If not, she might have to dispatch a helicopter to the city for a trip. The jeep kicked up yellow sand, roaring as it sped into the first checkpoint of Base 091. This was the deepest part of the most desolate Gobi Desert in the northwest, a top-secret restricted area whose coordinates couldn't be found on any map. The platoon leader on guard saw the familiar license plate, Eagle 01. He immediately gave a military salute. It was their regiment commander, Mu Huai, the living Yama king of the entire base. However, the moment the car door opened, the platoon leader's eyes nearly popped out of his head. The normally murderous regiment commander Mu carefully wrapped something in her military jacket and jumped out of the car, her movements gentle, as if she were holding a nuclear warhead that could detonate at any moment. The platoon leader stammered, "Calm," but his gaze unconsciously drifted to the gap in the jacket. Suddenly, a small, dirty hand reached out from inside, grabbing Mu Huai's collar. Immediately after, a small, greasy face peeked out, timidly looking at the armed soldiers around. Mu Huai shot a cold glance at the platoon leader, her eyes filled with warning. "What are you looking at? Never seen someone with their kid before?" After speaking, she carried me and strode towards the regiment's office building. But along the way, everyone looked as if they had seen a ghost. The legendary living Yama king, Mu Huai, had brought back a little boy and was protecting him so carefully. But Mu Huai paid no attention to any of this. Her forehead was beaded with sweat. It wasn't from tears, from tension. because since entering the base gates, I, in her arms, had started to tremble slightly. My small hand was clutching her clothes tightly. The smell of metal here was too strong. Everywhere was cold steel and stern faces. For a 4-year-old child who had just experienced a kidnapping and a gunfight, this oppressive feeling was truly overwhelming. Mu Huai whispered painfully, "Don't be afraid, Xiaofeng. Don't be afraid. This is where Mom works." The next second, she pushed open the office door. A wave of warmth hit their faces. She gently placed me on the field cot, quickly turned to lock the door, and only then let out a sigh of relief. This journey of a few hundred meters was more tiring than a 5-kilometer weighted cross-country run. As for me, I was huddled in the corner of the bed, warily observing this strange room. The tactical map on the wall, the pile of documents on the desk, the locked iron cabinet in the corner, and the faint smell of tobacco mixed with gun oil in the air. Just then, Mu Huai looked at my chapped lips, and suddenly slapped her forehead water and milk powder too. After Mu Huai prepared the milk, just as she was about to give it to me, she suddenly remembered she hadn't washed her hands. She quickly instructed, "Be good, Xiaofeng, don't move. Mom's going to wash her hands and we'll be right back." With that, she grabbed a wash basin and rushed out, closing the door behind her. The room immediately fell silent, but my gaze was suddenly drawn to the old-style military radio on the corner of the desk. It was clearly in standby mode, but in my ears, it was emitting a piercing screech, a sound that others couldn't hear at all, but to me, it was as uncomfortable as fingernails scratching a blackboard. I covered my ears in pain, but the sound still bored into my head. "It hurts." I couldn't help but mutter because I could see inside that black box. The wires were all tangled up. The red wire was wrapped around the blue wire. A blue point of light was blocked, angrily crashing about. It's crying. It's so uncomfortable. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly climbed off the bed. I struggled to climb onto the chair, kneeling on it, just high enough to look straight at the machine. "Don't cry. Let me blow on it for you." I reached out my small hand and touched the cold metal casing. The next second, that uncomfortable feeling of blockage became clearer. I saw on the side of the machine there were a few loose screws. The next second, I instinctively put my fingernail into the groove and gently turned it. The screw that should have required a screwdriver came loose in my hand as if it were oiled. After removing the outer casing, the dense electronic components inside were immediately exposed. But in my eyes, this wasn't some sophisticated device at all, just a castle made of incorrectly assembled Lego blocks. I reached out my fingers and pinched a micro-tuning capacitor. With a click, a soldered-on component was snapped off by my bare hands. Immediately after, I saw a red conductor wire tightly wrapped around the transformer. "Let go!" I pouted. My small hands quickly navigated the complex mess of wires, pulling wires, changing positions, reconnecting. I didn't have any tools, relying entirely on my small hands. Those hard metal corners became like modeling clay in my hands, bendable at my will. In less than 5 minutes, the desk was littered with a pile of components, while the inside of the radio had been completely transformed. Just as I tied a butterfly knot on the last blue wire, hurried footsteps came from outside. "Regiment Commander Mew, urgent situation. That damn old yellow bull radio is broken again." Along with the shout, the door was shoved open. The person who entered was Mu Huai, and behind her was the communications captain, Zhao Gang, with a worried expression. But when Mu Huai saw the scene on the desk, her hand trembled violently. The wash basin almost fell to the floor. The secure radio she treated as a treasure was now dismantled into pieces. The casing was thrown on the floor, components were scattered all over the desk, and her precious son was kneeling on the chair, holding an electron tube worth several hundred yuan, about to put it in his mouth. "Xiaofeng, don't eat that." Mu Huai threw down the wash basin, lunged forward in one step, and snatched the electron tube. Zhao Gang at the door was completely petrified. "Oh my god, this is the latest model 714 radio. The entire regiment only has this one. This is a treasure specially issued by the higher-ups, used to receive top-secret orders. Now it's been dismantled by a child." Mu Huai shielded me behind her, her expression unsightly, but she still spoke firmly. "Lao Zhao, stop yelling. Isn't it just a beat-up old radio? I'll pay for it, deduct it from my allowance." But Zhao Gang was so anxious he stomped his foot. "Regiment Commander, this isn't about money. This constitutes the crime of destroying military equipment. It's a matter for a military tribunal. Besides, there's a scheduled communication tonight. What are we going to do without this machine?" Just then, I hid behind Mu Huai, peeking out with half of my little head, and said in a small voice, "It stopped crying." When Zhao Gang heard this, he almost cried for real. "What do you mean, stopped crying? I think I'm the one who's about to cry." He looked at the mess of wires that resembled a talisman, his heart filled with despair. But Mu Huai also felt a pang of guilt. She gritted her teeth and picked up the microphone. "Whatever, let's give it a shot. Let's see if it can be turned on." Zhao Gang's face immediately turned pale with fear. "Regiment Commander, darn if it short circuits, it could blow up the transformer." Zhao Gang was about to stop her, but Mu Huai had already pressed the power button. The next second, the expected explosion didn't happen. Not even a puff of black smoke appeared. Instead, the indicator light came on, and it was an incredibly stable and bright green light. Immediately after, from the speaker that usually roared like a tractor, came an extremely soft rustling sound. It was pure background static without a single bit of interference. Zhao Gang stood there stunned. "It's on?" Mu Huai was also dumbfounded. She unconsciously turned the frequency knob. Suddenly, an incredibly clear voice came from the speaker, as if someone were speaking right in front of them. Dong Yao, Dong Yao. This is Tian Shan Shui Ying. Signal received. Please respond. Instantly, Zhao Gang's jaw dropped to the floor. He rushed over, staring at the frequency dial. This is the signal from the Tianshan outpost. How is that possible? Zhao Gang screamed as if he'd seen a ghost. The Tianshan outpost is 2,000 kilometers away, and there's a strong magnetic interference zone in between. The signal used to be all static. How can it be so clear? Mu Huai was also stunned. She looked at me in her arms, biting my finger, then looked at the radio that had been modified into a spider's web. Lao Zhao. Are you sure this is the Tianshan outpost? There's no mistake. That's Lao Zhang's voice. Zhao Gang was so excited he was trembling. He grabbed the microphone and shouted, Tianshan, this is Dong Wan. How is your signal so good? Did you switch to a high-power transmitter? The person on the other end was clearly even more astonished. Dong Wan, I am using the machine, the backup hand-crank generator. The power is only half of the normal output. How can you guys hear me? The office immediately fell into a dead silence. Zhao Gang slowly turned his head, looking at the components tossed on the table, then at the messy internal structure. Finally, his gaze locked onto me, who was innocently blinking my big eyes. Regiment Commander Zhao Gang swallowed, his voice as dry as if he had swallowed a handful of sand. Your son. What did he just do? At that moment, Mu Huai's heart was pounding like thunder, her mind flashing back to the truck, speeding across the Gobi Desert. She took a deep breath, trying to appear calm as she picked me up and rocked me. What did he do? Just fiddled with it. Mu Huai put on a casual expression, but her back was already drenched in sweat. My son thought it was noisy, so he tinkered with it a bit. What's wrong, old Zhao? You're a communications expert. Are you saying you can compare to my son's fiddling? Zhao Gang looked at the 4-year-old me in front of him and suddenly felt the urge to kneel. This isn't just fiddling. This clearly increased the sensitivity of the radio by at least 10 times. Is this the legendary child prodigy? I saw they were all silent and thought I had done something wrong again, so I pouted, feeling wronged. I pointed at the radio. Mommy, that wire needs to be wrapped 2 more times. Then that blue light can run faster. Hearing this, Zhao Gang, like an elementary school student, immediately took out his notebook and moved closer. 2 more wraps? Which wire? How do I wrap it? My little ancestor, please speak slowly. At the same time, the main assembly laboratory of Base 091 was, shrouded in a low-pressure atmosphere, the air filled with the smell of machine oil and impatience. This is all scrap paper. Along with a roar, a stack of blueprints was thrown forcefully to the ground, scattering like snow. The gray-haired Professor Qian Wei looked like an enraged lioness at that moment. In the laboratory, Professor Qian Wei was pacing back and forth, while a group of doctors and masters around her were all silent as winter cicadas, not even daring to breathe loudly. It's the drive shaft again. Professor Qian pointed at the steel shaft broken in 2 on the lab table, her finger trembling. This is a specially made alloy shaft for the new model tank. Theoretically, it can withstand 2,000 horsepower of torque. Why did it break as soon as it was put on the test bench? Why? Her eyes were bloodshot. Because of this key national project, she hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights. If the drive system fails, the new tank will just be a pile of scrap metal. Just then, Mu Huai was carrying me past, on our way to the cafeteria. Unexpectedly, I suddenly stopped moving. My little nose twitched twice, catching a particularly fragrant scent. It wasn't the smell of food, but the cool fragrance of special-grade steel, the smell of my favorite toy. I immediately pointed to the laboratory's main door. Mommy, I want to go inside. Seeing this, Mu Huai's scalp instantly tingled. Professor Qian was famously hot-tempered, and when she was working, no one dared to disturb her. Even the commander had to show her some respect. Be good now. That's where Professor Qian works. Let's go get some meat. Mu Huai wanted to carry me away, but I was especially stubborn today, my little legs kicking wildly, my eyes welling up with tears. I don't want to. There's a fun, big iron bar inside. Mu Huai really couldn't sway me, thinking to herself that just a peek from the door would probably be fine. As a result, the moment she pushed the door open, she ran right into the raging Professor Qian. Who let you in? Guards, get all unauthorized. Personnel out of here for me. Professor Qian was in a fit of anger, and seeing Mu Huai carrying a child inside, she became even more furious. The laboratory is a critical area. What are you doing bringing a child in? Is this a nursery? Get out! Mu Huai was scolded until her face turned pale, and just as she was about to explain, she suddenly realized her arms were empty. While the adults were talking, I had, like a little eel, slipped to the ground in a flash. Completely ignoring the fierce old woman, I took my short little legs straight to the huge drafting table, upon which was spread the main assembly blueprint that was giving all the experts a headache. I stood on my tiptoes but couldn't reach, so I looked around, brought over a small stool, and huffed and puffed as I climbed up. Hey kid, don't touch that! The assistant beside her was scared out of his wits. That's the original blueprint. If you smudge it, you're done for. Professor Qian also saw this scene, and her blood pressure shot up. Mu Huai, your son is something else. If he ruins the blueprint, I won't let you off the hook. Mu Huai rushed over in fear to grab me, but it was too late. I had already picked up a large red pencil from the table and drew a thick circle on the structural blueprint that was covered in dense lines. Then it seemed I felt the angle of a gear wasn't quite right. It was too sharp, so I tilted my little head and used the pencil to draw a meandering curve over the original design line. This looks much better, I mumbled, then added a few more lines at the bearing connection, turning the straight lines into a strange kind of curve. Just then, Professor Qian rushed to the table. Stop! She snatched the pencil from my hand, the corners of her mouth trembling with anger. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. She looked at the glaring red scribbles on the blueprint, her heart feeling like it was bleeding. This was the fruit of their months of hard work, ruined by a mischievous child like me. Professor Qian pointed at Mu Huai's nose and roared, Mu Huai, look at what a fine thing you've done. Get your son and get the hell out of here. Mu Huai knew she was in the wrong, her face flushing red, and quickly picked me up, intending to apologize and leave. Professor Qian, I'll be sure to discipline him when we get back. But lying on Mu Huai's shoulder, I looked at the furious old woman and blinked in confusion. You're so fierce, Mom. That drawing is clearly wrong. What did you say? Professor Qian, who was about to crumple the blueprint, heard that sentence, and her movements suddenly froze. She let out a scoff. A child who's not even weaned yet, what would you know about a wrong drawing? Although she said that, she still subconsciously looked down at the blueprint. She wanted to see what on earth I had drawn on the blueprint. However, with just this one look, Professor Qian's gaze seemed to be glued down, unable to move away. Her hand, about to crumple the paper, froze in midair. The red lines on the blueprint, though childish and crooked, looked just like scribbles. Professor Qian's pupils contracted violently. The curve I had corrected happened to cut through the root of the gear, forming an extremely unique cutting angle. If cut along this curve, the stress force that was originally concentrated at the gear root would be perfectly distributed across the entire surface of the shaft. This was a design that completely went against traditional mechanical drafting standards, but it perfectly matched the logic of force transmission dynamics. Professor Qian's hands started to tremble, this time not from anger, but from excitement. She looked at the marks at the bearing connection, and it was a biomimetic structure, a type of joint that resembled a bone joint. Although it increased the difficulty of machining, it could completely eliminate the phenomenon of resonance. The two major problems of shaft fracture and resonance had troubled them for 3 months, driving the entire project team to despair, yet they were solved by a few seemingly random scribbles of mine. For a moment, the laboratory was dead silent. Everyone was looking at Professor Qian. The anticipated outburst of rage never happened. Instead, this normally stern scientific authority, this pillar of the scientific community, was now bent over the table, her face almost pressed against the blueprint. She held a magnifying glass like a madwoman, staring intently at those red lines, muttering nonstop, "Genius. No, this is demonic talent. This angle is simply divine. Absolutely divine." Mu Huai carried me to the door, and seeing no movement behind her, she carefully turned her head to ask, "Professor Qian? So, we'll be leaving now." Unexpectedly, Professor Qian abruptly looked up, her eyes bloodshot, with a gleam in them, like a hungry wolf seeing fresh meat. She shoved aside the assistant next to her, not even noticing her slipped shoe, and rushed to the door with one bare foot. "Go where? Who dares to leave?" Professor Qian spread her arms, blocking Mu Huai's path like a mother hen protecting her chick. Her fierce, menacing face instantly squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. "Little one, how did you think of this curve?" I was startled by this rapid change of expression and subconsciously snuggled into my mother's arms. "Because that part of it was stuck," I explained seriously. "The power couldn't flow through that sharp part. It hurt a lot, so I made it round, so it would feel better. The power can't flow through, so it hurts." After hearing this, the old woman stood there stunned, muttering to herself as if she had heard some great truth. The next second, she suddenly let out a strange cry, gripped my small hand tightly, and tears of excitement streamed down her aged face. "A prodigy! This is a national treasure, then." She held my hand tightly and didn't let go, yelling at the bewildered Mu Huai. "Mu Huai, I'm taking this child. No one is to take him away. He was born to belong in the laboratory." Just as Mu Huai was confused by this sudden change, with a bang, the laboratory door was kicked open again. An old woman with hair as messy as a chicken's nest rushed in holding half a steamed bun. "Old Qian, you old hag, I heard you found a treasure. Where is it? Let me see." Behind her were Academician Li, from the radar systems, and Professor Zhang from materials science. A crowd of national treasure-level experts immediately crammed into the laboratory, all coming to see the commotion. Seeing this, Professor Qian instantly became like an old mother hen guarding her food, spreading her arms to protect me and my mother behind her, yelling warily, "What are you looking at? This is none of your business. All of you, get out!" "Yeah, old Qian, that's not very welcoming." The sly, chicken nest-haired old woman squeezed in and immediately spotted me in Mu Huai's arms. But as she got closer and saw the blueprint I had modified on the table, with just one look, thud, the steamed bun in her hand fell straight to the ground. She suddenly looked up, staring at Professor Qian in disbelief. "These lines, this idea. Old Qian, are you sure a 4-year-old child drew this?" Professor Qian stuck out her neck. "Nonsense, I saw it with my own eyes," Professor Qian said smugly, but the next second she became wary and announced to everyone, "Now that you've seen it, scram, don't interrupt my student's lesson." "Ah no, the student teaching me." The moment these words were spoken, Academician La, the radar specialist, immediately objected. She squeezed in, pointed at me, and said, What do you mean, your student? A genius like this is clearly more suited for radar antennas than. She put on a smile like the big bad wolf and took out a small object flashing with red light from her pocket. Little friend, come with Grandma, okay? Grandma will make you a dog that can bark and light up. Professor Keon immediately got angry. Old Lee, have you no shame, using a broken diode to trick a child? She immediately turned to me, waving her hand. Muge, don't mind her. Grandma will take you for a ride in a tank. A real tank. What's so fun about a tank? The chief rocket engineer, Wang Zhen, refused to be outdone. She pulled straight from her coat a shiny gold medal and dangled it in front of me. Come on, go with Grandma Wang. Grandma will take you to see big rockets, the kind that go whoosh and fly up to the sky. In an instant, the entire lab became as chaotic as a marketplace. A group of national treasure-level experts, with a combined age of several hundred years, had all lost their composure, surrounding Mu Huai, arguing until they were red in the face. He's a budding talent in mechanical engineering? Nonsense. This intuition is clearly for electronics. Frightened by this scene, I buried my head deep in my mother's arms and whispered, Mommy, I'm scared. It was those two words that made the murderous aura around Mu Huai explode. She slammed her hand on the table, even putting her pistol down hard on the blueprint. All of you, shut up. Mu Huai's face darkened, her whole body radiating a murderous aura. Her sharp gaze swept over each of the old women. This is my son, a human being, not your laboratory equipment, not an object to be fought over. He's only 4 years old. He just survived a kidnapping. Right now, he's hungry and tired. Anyone who dares to scare him again, don't blame me for not respecting my elders. The group of veteran experts, who were usually praised to the heavens, had never been yelled at like this before. But under Mu Huai's god of death-like aura, they all collectively shrank back. Wang Zhen awkwardly rubbed her hands, wanting to ease the tension. Xiaomu, don't be angry. We were just overly fond of such a talent. As she spoke, she was about to put away the object in her hand, but the thing she was holding was a new model missile guidance circuit board, currently under research. Her hand trembled, and with a clatter, the delicate circuit board fell straight to the ground. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. That was the only prototype. Wang Zhen quickly picked it up, tenderly blowing off the dust. Thank goodness, it's not broken. However, just then, I, who was still nestled in Mu Huai's arms, suddenly pointed at the circuit board and spoke up. I suddenly peeked my little head out and pointed at the circuit board in Grandma Wang's hand. That's installed backward. Grandma Wang froze and subconsciously looked down. What's installed backward? Little one, this is the most high-precision integrated circuit. I've been making rockets my whole life. How could I have installed it backward? The surrounding experts also chuckled. Although I was good at correcting blueprints, electronics was a completely different field, not to mention this was designed by Chief Engineer Wang herself. I saw she didn't believe me and became a little impatient because, in my eyes, on that green board, the light flow from the little black square was flowing backward, crashing into the other light flows, which was extremely uncomfortable. It is backward, that little black square. Its leg is in the wrong place. I pointed at a chip and said loudly. Grandma Wang frowned and picked up a magnifying glass to examine it closely. This is the main control chip. The notch is facing up. Pin 1 is here. There's no problem. She shook her head, feeling certain that I had seen it wrong. However, just then, that's not right. Academician Lai from the side suddenly leaned in, her eyes fixed on the chip's solder pad. Old Wang, look closely. The bottom layer wiring of this board was modified. If you follow the standard rule with the notch facing up, the power and ground lines will be reversed. The moment these words were spoken, Grandma Wang's expression changed instantly. She rushed to the test bench and plugged in the circuit board to test it. A piercing alarm sounded, and the red alarm light immediately lit up. Then came a burning smell. Oh my god, if not for the fall just now causing a poor connection, this priceless prototype would have been completely fried by now. Just by turning the chip around, Grandma Wang's trembling hands removed the chip, rotated it 180 degrees, and soldered it back on. Plugging it in again, the green light came on, and the waveform was perfect. The test probe in Grandma Wang's hand fell to the floor with a clatter. Her whole body was as if struck by lightning, standing frozen on the spot. She suddenly turned around, looking at me yawning in my mother's arms, her eyes filled with reverence. You have to know, if this circuit board had actually been installed in the missile, it would have been an unimaginable launch accident. Yet a 4-year-old child like me, with just a glance at the circuit board that fell on the ground, had pointed out a fatal mistake that even the chief engineer had missed. Thump. Grandma Wang's legs went weak, and she slumped to the ground. She looked at Mu Huai, her tone weak but incredibly sincere. Regiment Commander Mu. Ah, no. Mother Mu, does your son need a godmother? The kind who knows how to build rockets. As soon as she finished speaking, this gray-haired chief rocket engineer lost all composure and clung to Mu Huai's sleeve, her gaze more affectionate than when seeing her own grandson. The corner of Mu Huai's mouth twitched violently. The next second, she held me even tighter, as if guarding against a thief, staring at the group of national treasure-level experts before her. All of you, get lost! Mu Huai's face suddenly darkened, a loud roar making the entire laboratory shake. This is my biological son. No one is to get any ideas. I immediately snuggled into my mother's wide embrace, my hand still tightly clutching that circuit board. I blinked my big eyes, curiously looking at this group of strange old women. Why are they all kneeling? Are they playing house, mommy? I mumbled a sentence, my small hand rubbing my flat tummy. It was this soft call that made the murderous aura on Mu Huai vanish in an instant. She immediately switched to a fawning smile and lowered her head to gently coax me. Okay, mommy will take you to drink some milk right now. We won't pay any attention to this bunch of weird old ladies. After saying that, Mu Huai, as if carrying a nuclear bomb, carefully protected me and squeezed through the crowd to leave. But the old academicians behind were still beating their chests and stomping their feet in distress. What a waste! How can you let a genius like that go drink milk? Old Qian, you have to think of something. This child's fingers were born for precision instruments. Just then, Professor Qian scrambled up from the floor, a golden gleam flashing from behind her glasses. Run where? He's right here in our base 091. How could he possibly run away? She watched Mu Huai's departing figure and chuckled, looking just like an old fox. As long as he's on the base, even if she is the living Yama, she can't stop us. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. This is base 091, test site number 1. The wind on the Gobi Desert is as sharp as a knife, but the atmosphere was incredibly lively. Hundreds of technical personnel and soldiers formed a giant semicircle, and at the center of the area was clearly a huge object covered by a tarp. That was the main battle tank, a new model codenamed Lei Ting, which the nation had spent hundreds of millions on. The king of land warfare that had been researched and developed for 5 years. Today was its first time, undergoing a full system ignition test. Mu Huai was the regiment commander of the guard unit, responsible for security. But today she was a little different, because inside her military coat, it was bulging, revealing my little head. I was hugging a military canteen filled with warm water, curiously looking at the large iron block in the distance. Regiment commander, this is against the rules. The guard Xiaozhang beside her lowered his voice, his face full of worry. Bringing a family member into a top-secret testing area, this is an offense worthy of a court-martial. But Mu Huai remained expressionless, coldly scanning her surroundings. The commander gave special approval. Xiaozhang immediately shrunk back, not daring to say another word. Actually, Mu Huai was suffering on the inside too. Ever since I showed my talent last time, those old experts would block her door every day, demanding to see me. To avoid the trouble, she could only bring me with her wherever she went. Moreover, she also had a vague feeling that I belonged here, belonged to this place filled with steel and the smell of engine oil. Just then, following the order of the on-site commander-in-chief, the huge tarp was pulled down by the soldiers. Under the sun, a ferocious-looking tank with thick armor revealed its true form. I pointed at the majestic, massive iron vehicle, excitedly telling Mu Huai to look quickly. At the command, the ignition was successful, and the gigantic roar made me incredibly excited. All the soldiers immediately erupted in earth-shattering cheers. However, the cheers hadn't lasted for 3 seconds, when that low roar suddenly changed pitch. An extremely piercing sound suddenly came from deep within the engine bay. Chief Engineer Qian's expression changed drastically, and a horrified scream came through the radio from the test driver. What's wrong? Report, engine speed is surging abnormally. Turbine temperature is past the red line. Vibration amplitude is off the charts. The chassis is about to fall apart. The driver screamed in despair. I can't shut it down. The kill switch is broken. It's accelerating on its own. It was over. This steel beast of several dozen tons was completely out of control. The scene immediately descended into chaos, and alarms echoed across the Gobi Desert. It's going to blow a cylinder any second. Just then, as Mu Huai was about to grab me and retreat, I suddenly started struggling violently in her arms and burst into tears without any warning. Mu Huai thought I was scared and quickly covered my ears with her hands, but I shook my head desperately, my small hands gripping her collar tightly, crying my heart out. It hurts. Mu Huai. Mu Huai. I was frantic with worry, and she quickly checked my body, but I pointed my little finger at the tank that was about to explode. It hurts. It's crying. It's in a lot of pain. What? Mu Huai froze on the spot. The tank? I looked at the tank before me. What was the piercing sound of mechanical failure to others, to me, was the tragic cry of a giant beast before its death. I could even see countless red points of light dancing crazily at its engine, as if it were bleeding. Save it, Mu Huai. Save it. I cried until I nearly fainted, my small body trembling uncontrollably. Mu Huai's heart felt like it was being squeezed tight. On one side was the steel beast about to explode, capable of flattening an area dozens of meters around. On the other were my tear-filled eyes, full of pleading and pain. Reason told her to grab me and run immediately, but I was a genius who could turn scrap iron into a divine artifact. I said it was hurting, so it must really be hurting. Regiment commander, let's go, it's about to blow. Xiaozhang rushed forward to pull them away, but Mu Huai violently shoved his hand away. She took a deep breath, her gaze instantly turning wild and resolute. Everyone, fall back 500 meters. Without my order, no one is to approach. After yelling that, she didn't retreat, but instead, holding me, she charged towards the tank that could explode at any moment, sprinting straight for it. She's crazy, she must be crazy. Chief Engineer Qian, seeing this from a distance, fainted on the spot from shock. The entire site was screaming, telling Mu Huai to come back quickly, but she acted as if she didn't hear, holding me and running like a cheetah in the strong wind. A wave of heat hit their faces, mixed with a thick, burning smell. Mu Huai will trust you this once. You'd better be right, otherwise the two of us will become barbecue today. Mu Huai gritted her teeth and instantly rushed to the rear of the tank. By now, the engine bay cover was already deformed, and scorching steam was spewing out frantically. Mu Huai yelled at me. Where? I immediately stopped crying, my small hand suddenly grasping at the air. In my eyes, a purplish-red line was choking the engine's throat. There. I pointed at an inconspicuous hydraulic line. Without a second word, Mu Huai pulled out her military dagger and pried open the protective plate. The scorching steam instantly caused a large blister on her hand, but she didn't even frown. The next second, she lifted my body, bringing me towards that burning mechanical heart. The air around us was distorted by the high temperature, but I didn't feel any heat at all. I could even feel this frenzied machine calm down a little upon seeing me. There, it doesn't hurt. I reached out with my dirty little hand, as if stroking a ruffled kitten, and gently placed it on the fuel line that was vibrating the most violently, then gently stroked down along the pipe. To others, I just touched the pipe for a moment, but on a microscopic level, a deadly metal burr from the machining process was instantly smoothed out by me. The fatal knot causing the resonance was undone. I let out a sigh of relief. The next second, the ear-splitting shriek abruptly stopped, and immediately after, the engine's heartbeat recovered. No longer a frantic roar, but a magnificent, low, and powerful growl. The chassis shaking disappeared, and the black smoke dissipated. The entire test site fell deathly silent, everyone like frozen statues, with looks of utter disbelief on their faces. Mu Huai held me and slumped to the ground, her entire body soaked in a cold sweat. I was exhausted, and buried my small, greasy face into her embrace. Mommy, it doesn't hurt anymore. My voice reached everyone's ears clearly. Mu Huai looked at me, and suddenly felt the urge to kneel before me. This wasn't a son, this was clearly a god descended to Earth. Next, the atmosphere of the test site went from a horror movie to a fervent religious scene. A miracle. This is a miracle that science cannot explain. Chief Engineer Kian scrambled over and spread his arms to block the two of us. No one is to approach that engine. Preserve the scene. He yelled himself hoarse, spraying saliva all over Mu Huai's face. Mu Huai wiped her face in disgust, about to take me to wash my face. What are you washing? That's holy oil. A metal Chief Engineer Kian stared fixedly at my small, grimy hands, his burning gaze looking like it wanted to devour me. What did the boy do just now? Did you see it? Mu Huai looked bewildered. He just touched it, just one touch. A problem that stumped us for half a year has been solved. Chief Engineer Kian spoke incoherently. This is truly unscientific, but it's so damn fascinating. Just then, several dark green jeeps roared up. The car doors opened, and an old woman with 2 gold stars on her shoulders strode over. It was the base's highest commander, Commander Zhao. What's going on? The alarm is sounding throughout the base. Did the test fail? Commander Zhao had a stern face and a dignified gaze, but when she saw the stably running tank, she was stunned. When she saw me and Mu Huai, she was even more astonished. Reporting, Commander. Chief Engineer Kian suddenly turned and stood at attention, his voice unprecedentedly serious. The test was a success, but the key to success wasn't us, it was him. He pointed a trembling finger straight at me. Commander Zhao's brows furrowed tightly. Lao Qian, are you senile? What are you doing pointing at a child? Commander, I am not senile. I request an immediate lockdown of the scene and a review of all surveillance footage. Chief Engineer Kian took a deep breath. On behalf of all the scientific research personnel of Base 091, I formally propose to grant Comrade Mugi the title of Special Grade Technical Advisor of the base, codename Bailing Diao. The whole scene was in an uproar, and Mu Huai was also stunned. A special grade technical advisor was on par with a chief engineer and this son of hers who was still drinking milk. Commander Zhao's expression darkened. Lao Qian, there is no room for jokes in the military. But Chief Engineer Kian stood up straight. Commander, after you see the footage, you will feel that this title is still too low for him. Half an hour later in the base command center, a large screen replayed on a loop, the scene of me giving a gentle stroke, which instantly tamed the frenzied tank and made it docile. The meeting room was deathly silent. Commander Zhao sat in the main seat, the cigarette in her hand burning down to her fingers without her noticing. She had watched the video 10 times, and each time, a chill ran down her spine. This wasn't technique, but a talent beyond human comprehension, an affinity with machines. Commander Zhao muttered, then suddenly extinguished her cigarette. She turned her head to look at me at the end of the conference table. I was swinging my short legs, my eyes fixated on the chocolate bar in front of her. On Commander Zhao's stern face, a smile like the big bad wolf appeared. She personally picked up the chocolate bar and placed it in front of me. Want to eat? I nodded furiously, drooling. If you want it, call me Grandma and I'll give it all to you. Grandma, I called out crisply and cleanly. Whoever has candy is my ancestor. Commander Zhao roared with laughter, ruffling my hair, but the next second, she straightened up, looked around at everyone, and her smile instantly vanished. Relay my orders. From this moment on, I approve Qianwai's proposal, appointing Mu Jie as the special grade technical advisor of Base 091. Codename, Bailing Diao. His security level is raised to SS class equal to my own. Guard Regiment Commander Mu Huai present. Mu Huai saluted sharply. From today on, you have only one mission. Commander Zhao pointed at me as I was unwrapping the chocolate. Even if this base explodes, you must protect this biling bird for me. He is our nation's treasure. If he loses a single hair, he'll shoot you. Mu Huai looked at me, my mouth covered in dark chocolate, and shouted loudly, "Yes, sir, I guarantee I will complete the mission." I was startled and almost dropped my chocolate. I looked at the serious Mu Huai and held out the half-eaten piece of chocolate to her mouth. "Mommy, eat this and you won't be so fierce anymore." After that, ever since I became a special grade advisor, I wasn't happy at all. Those white-haired ladies surrounded me every day talking about fluid mechanics, quantum entanglement. I didn't understand any of it. It just made me dizzy. I wanted to play with building blocks. I pushed the book away forcefully, pouting in protest. Chief Engineer Keon immediately brought out a high-end Lego set with a grin. Play as much as you want." But I only glanced at it and pouted in disgust. Fake. They don't make any sound. In my eyes, only metal was alive. Mu Huai looked at me sadly, feeling heartbroken. "Let's go. Mom will take you to a wonderful place." She put me on her shoulders and strode out of the laboratory. From behind came the angry call of Chief Engineer Keon. "Mu Huai, he hasn't finished his lesson." "Where are you taking him? For some practical lessons?" Mu Huai didn't look back. The jeep sped off, heading straight for the most remote corner of the base, a place filled with barbed wire and signs saying no entry. Inside were piles of exploded cannon barrels, shattered airplane wings, all scrap machinery. This was the base's materials recovery station, commonly known as the junkyard. But as soon as I got out of the car, my eyes immediately lit up. "Wow!" I exclaimed in amazement. In others' eyes, this was a pile of trash, but in my eyes, it was Alibaba's treasure trove. Countless colorful lines danced on the scrap metal. Every single component was waving at me. "Mommy, let me down!" I eagerly slid down and ran inside with my short little steps. "Slow down." Mu Huai hurried after me. As soon as the old guard saw me and Mu Huai, he immediately saluted and opened the gate. I was like a happy little mouse, diving into a pile of scrap radar antennas. "This one? It'll take this one." I picked up a burnt circuit board and stuffed it into my pocket, and this ring too. I struggled to pull out a rusty tractor flywheel. Mu Huai followed behind like a coolie, and soon her arms were full of scrap metal, including even a pressure cooker, discarded by the canteen because it was leaking. "Kid, what do you need this for? To cook a landmine?" Mu Huai didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but I ignored her, found an empty patch of ground, squatted down, and started assembling. I took apart the pressure cooker, stuffed the flywheel inside, then wrapped it with magnets and coils. Next, I used wires to connect this pile of junk to the battery of a scrap truck. My movements were as smooth as flowing water, completely based on intuition. "Mommy, help me hold this." I pointed at the pressure cooker. Mu Huai said nothing and held it tightly. It was ice cold to the touch. "What on earth is this?" I giggled and immediately connected the power source. With a buzz of electricity, the flywheel inside the pressure cooker began to spin at high speed. Mu Huai suddenly felt a strange pushing force in her palms, as if something was pushing upwards. She unconsciously let go, and the next second, a sight that made her eyes nearly pop out occurred. The pressure cooker containing the several dozen-pound iron lump actually levitated. It hovered half a meter in the air, humming. The small screws and nails scattered around also seemed to lose their gravity, orbiting the pressure cooker, looking like a miniature galaxy. My God. Mu Huai's mouth gaped open as she tried to catch the screw in midair, but found that she couldn't grab it. "Isn't it pretty, Mommy?" I clapped my hands, my eyes crinkling with laughter. "This is a balloon I made for you." Mu Huai looked at this cyberpunk-style pressure cooker balloon and swallowed hard. She suddenly felt that I probably didn't just know how to fix tanks. I was about to fly up to the heavens. "Quick, turn it off." Mu Huai keenly noticed that the scrap truck was also vibrating slightly, as if it were about to be pulled in. If it really got pulled in, this balloon would turn into a bomb. I obediently pulled out the wire. Click. The pressure cooker fell heavily to the ground, creating a deep pit. Everything returned to normal. Mu Huai wiped away her cold sweat, looked at my innocent face, and made a resolution. In the future, I must absolutely not let him get near the base's armory. Absolutely not. A few days later, in the drone laboratory, project leader Dr. Wang was so anxious, she was about to pull all her hair out. "It won't work. It definitely won't work. This titanium alloy wing joint is too thin. The robotic arm's precision isn't good enough. It'll burn through with one weld." Another female doctor was also dejected. "Manual welding won't work either. It needs to be continuous for 10 minutes, with hand tremors not exceeding 0.0 mm. How can a human hand do that?" This was the Changkong drone project, urgently established for border reconnaissance, but it had been stuck at the final welding stage for a whole week. Just then, the lab door opened and I toddled in. In my left arm I held a large milk bottle, the nipple in my mouth gulping down milk. Mu Huai followed behind with a helpless expression. "Muge, don't run around. They are working." But I had already squeezed my way to the workbench and stood on my tiptoes to look at the silver-gray wing. A flash of disdain appeared in my big eyes. Ugly. I took out the nipple and commented in my childish voice. "The line here is broken. The airflow can't get through. It will fall down." Dr. Wang was stunned, looking at me who wasn't even as tall as the workbench. "Little kid. This isn't a toy. Get out of the way." but I ignored her and instead noticed the industrial argon arc welder next to it, which was bigger than my arm. To everyone's horrified gazes, I tucked the milk bottle under my arm, reached out with my right hand, and grabbed the welder. "Oh, my little ancestor, don't touch that." Dr. Wong was scared out of her wits. "That's over 1,000 degrees. It could cook you instantly." Mu Huai was also startled and was about to rush forward when I expertly put on the unbelievably large safety goggles next to me and gave the knob a turn with my small hand. The current and gas flow parameters were immediately adjusted. My movements were as practiced as a 30-year veteran craftsman. "Be quiet," I said, my voice muffled by the mask. The next second, a dazzling blue-white electric arc instantly lit up. Everyone unconsciously closed their eyes, thinking it was over. The multi-million yuan prototype was about to become scrap. However, the expected sound of burning through never came, only a stable, pulsing sizzle. Dr. Wong squinted through her fingers and instantly she was struck by lightning, frozen on the spot. She saw me holding the welding gun with one hand, my small body as steady as a rock. The heavy welding torch in my hand seemed to be weightless. The torch's tungsten tip and the wing's surface always maintained a perfectly precise distance. My wrist moved gently, as if embroidering flowers, and a beautiful, exquisite fish-scale weld bead slowly appeared on the titanium alloy surface. My left hand was still holding the milk bottle, and I would occasionally lower my head to take a sip, drinking milk while welding, completely unaffected. Only these two sounds echoed in the entire lab. The female doctors were all dumbfounded, their jaws dropping to the floor. 5 minutes later, the electric arc went out. I put down the welding torch and took off my goggles, leaving 2 funny red marks on my face. "It's done." Dr. Wang came closer, trembling, holding a magnifying glass to look at the weld. The silvery white weld was flat and smooth, with folds as regular as if they were stamped by a machine, more perfect than any machine. I even took the liberty of filling in a small dent at the base, making the entire curve smoother. "Godlike skill," Dr. Wang mumbled to herself. Suddenly, she looked up at me, who was asking for a hug. "Commander Mu, can I borrow this child for 2 days? Even an hour would be fine." Mu Huai picked me up with one arm and took 2 steps back warily. "In your dreams, my son needs his nap." After saying that, she held me and ran for her life, leaving behind a room full of people staring at the god-level weld and questioning their existence as female doctors. However, in the quiet of this late night, in the canteen's kitchen, there was a figure quietly bustling about. Her name was Zhang. She had worked at the base for 10 years, with an honest demeanor, always smiling at everyone. The soldiers all called her Sister Zhang. At this moment, she was carefully preparing a late-night meal, a special steamed milk egg custard, along with some freshly baked small cookies. This was prepared just for me. Zhang wiped her hands on her apron, but seemed to accidentally touch the black button on her collar. That button was the most advanced of its kind in the world, an advanced passive resonance listening device. It didn't transmit any signals, only activating when it received a specific frequency. The base's standard security gates couldn't detect it at all. I must find out who Bai Ling Diao is. This is a kill or be killed order from above. Zhang took a deep breath, picked up the food tray, put on her familiar honest smile, and walked towards the laboratory. At this time, I was crawling on the magnetic playmat, while Mu Huai was cleaning her gun beside me, her eyes occasionally glancing at the door. Zhang knocked and entered with a grin. "Commander Mu, I brought some food for the little one. Sister Zhang, to trouble you this late." Mu Huai put down her gun and stood up politely. Towards this old comrade who had taken care of everyone for 10 years, she had no guard up at all. Then, Zhang placed the food tray on the coffee table and squatted down. Looking at me, "Muge, Auntie made some delicious food for you. Come and have a taste." Her voice was gentle, but her body leaned slightly forward without a trace, trying to get the button on her collar closer to me. If she could just record my voice or take a picture, her mission would be complete. I looked up at this smiling auntie, and my little eyebrows suddenly furrowed. I suddenly threw the magnet down, covered my ears tightly with my small hands, and backed away, hiding right behind Mu Huai's legs. The smile on Zhang's face froze. "What's wrong? Muge, do I smell like cooking fumes?" Mu Huai also found it strange. I was usually very close with the cooks in the canteen. Mu Huai spoke to me gently. "Muge, you have to be polite," but I just shook my head and pointed at Zhang's chest. "So noisy. Auntie has a bug on her. The hissing sound is so annoying. A bug?" Zhang's heart skipped a beat and cold sweat instantly broke out, but her psychological fortitude was extremely strong. She forced herself to stay calm, brushing her clothes. "There's no bug. I just took a shower. It's right there on that black bean." I pointed at the button, my voice shrill. "It's making noise. It's talking to the bad guys outside." This sentence was like a clap of thunder echoing in the room. Mu Hui's expression changed instantly. As a king of special forces, the phrase "talking to the bad guys outside" was an extremely sensitive description for her. Even if it was just a child's unfiltered words, she would absolutely not ignore any risk. Zhang. Mu Hui's voice was as cold as ice. "Take off the button on your collar." The honest smile on Zhang's face finally couldn't be maintained. She knew she had been exposed, although she didn't know how a 4-year-old child could discover a listening device that even electronic sniffing dogs couldn't detect. But she knew, if she didn't risk it all, there would be no more chances. At that moment, a vicious glint flashed into Zhang's eyes. Her right hand suddenly pulled out a boning knife from under the food tray. Instead of retreating, she advanced, rushing straight towards me. Since I'm exposed, it'll kill the target. Mu Huai didn't even need to draw her gun. The moment Zhang made her move, her roundhouse kick came out with a whistling sound. With a dull thud, Zhang, along with the knife, was sent flying, smashing hard against the wall and spitting out a mouthful of fresh blood. Before she could even hit the ground, Mu Huai was on her like a phantom. With a crack, she dislocated her jaw and both her arms. The entire sequence took less than a second. Zhang convulsed in pain on the ground, like a dead dog. Mu Huai ripped the button off, squeezed it hard. Inside was clearly a complex microcircuit. It really was a listening device. Mu Huai turned her head and looked at me cowering in the corner of the sofa, trembling all over with fear. If not for my extraordinary sensory abilities, this thorn that had been hidden for 10 years would have leaked who knows how many more secrets. It's okay now, Muge. Mu Huai walked over and held me tightly in her arms, shielding me from the bloody scene. Mommy has crushed the bug. I nuzzled into her embrace but whispered, Mommy, there are still many more bugs. Mu Huai's body stiffened. Where? I pointed to the dark Gobi Desert outside the window. There are a lot outside. Lots of bugs are crawling this way. The interrogation room was dead silent. Only the dim yellow lamp overhead emitted a faint hissing sound. But this sentence of mine made someone in the interrogation room completely panic. Zhang, who was leaning against the iron chair, her initial expression of a dead pig not fearing boiling water changed instantly. Her pupils suddenly shrank to a pinpoint and she subconsciously tried to pull her left hand back. Mu Huai immediately caught this small movement, but she didn't make a move. Instead, she squatted down and asked me very gently, Muge, tell Mu Huai, where's the bug? I clutched Mu Huai's collar tightly and timidly pointed into the air. In my vision, this room wasn't empty at all. Countless distorted gray lines were continuously pouring out from that evil auntie's wrist. Continuously pouring out. They were like maggots, desperately squeezing out through the cracks in the wall and emitting piercing screams. It was so noisy my head hurt. It's right there. I buried my face in Mu Huai's chest, my voice muffled. They're screaming, so noisy like the sound of cicadas crying. Mu Huai suddenly looked up, her gaze as sharp as electricity, locking onto Zhang's left wrist where there was a seemingly ordinary digital watch. It was a Casio commonly seen in the 90s. The technical department had checked it 3 times and said there was nothing wrong with it. The record keeper, Xiao Li, asked cautiously from the side, Commander, could it be that the child is just frightened? Zhang's lips curled into a mocking smile. Commander Mu, is this the interrogation method of your liberation army? So low class? Using a child's nonsense to scare me? Mu Huai just stood up coldly. Shut up. Just 2 words, but the killing intent from someone who had waded through mountains of corpses and seas of blood instantly made Zhang shut her mouth. Then, Mu Huai held me and walked step by step towards Zhang, her large military boots stepping on the floor, each step feeling like it was stomping on Zhang's heart. Mu Huai grabbed Zhang's wrist with one hand. Muge, is this thing making the noise? Zhang struggled desperately. What are you doing? This is a keepsake from my late father, but I glanced at the watch with disgust. In my eyes, the gears and circuits inside this watch were tangled in a mess of black wires, and they were the ones making the noise. I said firmly, it's broken. Then, while everyone, including Mu Huai and Zhang, had yet to react, I reached out with my chubby little hand, and using just my fingernail on the watch face, gently pried at the seam on the side. With a click, the back cover of this specially made waterproof digital watch, which was supposed to be completely sealed, popped open. Zhang's eyes almost popped out of her head. This watch couldn't be opened without specialized tools, and forcing it open would trigger a small amount of acid to corrode the chip. But no acid flowed out, because in the instant I opened it, I had already casually ripped out the wire connecting the acid capsule. I just felt that wire was in the way. It's so messy in here, I mumbled, and the next second I pulled a paper clip that had been straightened out from my pocket, held it in my hand, and then, on the watch's dense integrated circuit board, I quickly started flicking and probing. My movements were astonishingly fast. People nearby could only see a blur. The previously silent digital watch suddenly emitted a strange electrical sound. Its LCD screen flickered wildly, displaying a string of error codes. Zhang's face instantly turned ashen. She completely broke down. Stop, you little monster, you'll break it! That was her lifeline, the only tool she had for one-way communication with her superiors. But I clapped my hands in satisfaction. Done. Just rearrange these wires and it won't be noisy anymore. With my final flick, the paperclip was firmly inserted between 2 solder points. The second the paperclip was inserted, the error code on the LCD screen vanished instantly, replaced by a constantly changing numerical coordinate and a clear directional arrow. The record keeper, Xiao Li, leaned in to look, and was so shocked he dropped his pen. Captain, this is a reverse tracking signal. This watch is actively searching for its mother station. Mu Huai's eyes immediately became feverish. Although she didn't understand electronics, she understood tactical opportunities. This wasn't a repair. This was practically turning the enemy's earpiece into our radar. And I handed the watch to Mu Huai with a face expecting praise. Mommy, the bugs have all gone home. They're not noisy anymore. Mu Huai planted a kiss on my cheek. Good boy. Mommy will make you 2 bottles of milk tonight. Immediately after, she turned and threw the watch to Xiao Li, her tone as cold as iron. Notify the entire Lai Ying assault team. Full gear. We move out in 5 minutes. Coordinates 334, 45 kilometers from the base. It's a big rat. Zhang immediately slumped into her chair, looking at me with eyes full of terror, as if looking at a demon in human form. How is this possible? The pinnacle of Western electronic technology was cracked by a milk-drinking child with a paperclip. 45 minutes later, deep in the Gobi Desert, inside an adobe house camouflaged an abandoned sheep pen, several agents were anxiously adjusting the radio. What's going on? Why did a Zhang signal suddenly turn into a continuous beep? Not good. We're exposed. Retreat now. Just as the lead agent was about to unplug the power, a loud bang erupted. The sturdy wooden door was blown to pieces by a directional charge. Several ghost-like figures rushed in. Don't move! The black muzzles of the People's Liberation Army were immediately pointed at each agent's forehead. Mu Huai strode into the house, walking straight to the radio that was still, emitting a beeping sound. The screen was displaying the exact same frequency as the one on a Zhang's watch. Commander, we've captured 7 of them. All are remnants of the Shahu. We also recovered many observation records. They've been monitoring our base's runway all along. At this moment, Mu Huai picked up a file from the table, flipped through a few pages, and her expression suddenly changed. In the file was a blurry satellite photo marked with a red trajectory, the endpoint of which was base 091. The title clearly read regarding the contingency plan for the possible emergency landing of the target codenamed He Sha. He Sha? Mu Huai frowned deeply. She had a strong premonition that the target of these rats was definitely not simple. Just then, a soldier found a photograph and handed it to Mu Huai. Commander, look at this. Mu Huai took the photo, and with just one glance, her heart tightened. The photo was taken secretly from a distance. The background was the gate of the base's residential area. In the photo, Mu Huai was carrying me out of a car, and my small body was circled with a prominent red pen. Next to it was a large question mark with a small caption written, Suspected high-value target. Recommend capture or elimination. Elimination? Mu Huai's fingers suddenly clenched, crushing the photo into a crumpled ball. An unprecedentedly violent aura erupted from her. The surrounding temperature seemed to drop by 10 degrees instantly. The lead agent pinned to the ground was even, scared by Mu Huai's gaze, into wetting himself on the spot. Take them back. Mu Huai's voice was very soft, but it exuded a bone-chilling coldness. I will interrogate them myself. Interrogate them word by word. Stepping out of the house, the northwesterly wind cut like a knife. Mu Huai said through gritted teeth, If you want to touch my son, you better see if your lives are tough enough. The moment they returned to the base, a piercing air raid siren immediately shattered the tranquility of the entire base. Level 1 alert. A hoarse voice from the broadcast speaker tore through the sky. Mu Huai had just escorted the prisoners to the solitary confinement cell, and before she could even take a sip of water, a thunderous roar came from overhead. The sound made the windows rattle violently, and the teacup on the table was dancing. Commander, the control tower reports, an unidentified fighter jet is requesting an emergency landing. The communications soldier's hat was askew as he shouted in panic, Code name, He Sha. No identification code. He Sha? Mu Huai's heart skipped a beat. This was the name mentioned in the documents, recovered yesterday. She suddenly rushed out of the command post, looked up, and saw in the gray sky a giant black shadow was hurtling down unsteadily. It was a heavy fighter jet with an extremely futuristic shape, a Su-27 flanker, but its condition was terrible. The left engine was spewing thick black smoke, and only one of its landing gear was halfway down. The next second, the plane slammed onto the runway, its wheels creating a dazzling dragon of fire as they screeched against the ground. The massive fuselage, like an out-of-control bison, charged madly towards the sandwall at the end of the runway. Fire team, move! Mu Huai shouted as she jumped into a jeep, but suddenly discovered a small head in the back seat. I was leaning out the window, my big round eyes staring unblinkingly at the smoking aircraft. There was no fear in my eyes, only a strange sense of heartache. Get down, Muge, it's dangerous. Mu Huai was anxious and reached out to pick me up, but I pointed at the distant plane and pouted. Mommy, the big bird is hurt. It's crying so hard. It says its belly hurts. Its neck hurts too. Mu Huai was stunned, but the situation was urgent. She slammed on the gas. Hold on tight. The jeep sped toward the end of the runway. The plane finally came to a stop, now less than 10 meters from the blast wall. The fire from the left engine had spread to the fuselage, billowing black smoke. Rescue the pilot. Ground crew set up a ladder and rushed up, but they shouted in despair. No good. It won't open. The canopy is deformed and jammed. The electronic lock isn't working. The manual lock won't budge either. Break it, use an axe. We can't. This is special bulletproof glass. If we accidentally trigger the ejection seat, the pilot will be crushed into a meat paste. The scene was chaotic. The high temperature was baking the cockpit. The pilot inside, his face covered in blood, was already unconscious. If he didn't get out, he would surely die. Just when everyone was at a loss, a small figure suddenly jumped down from the jeep. Muge, come back, Mu Huai, who was commanding the scene, turned her head and her soul almost left her body. I ran, my two short legs running like the wind, still clutching the small spoon I used for my milk. I ignored the high heat and surrounding noise and ran straight towards the giant fighter jet. Where did that kid come from? Stop him, an officer shouted in panic, but I nimbly slipped through the security cordon and climbed up the maintenance ladder with both hands and feet. At that moment, the entire scene fell silent. Everyone held their breath, watching a child not even as tall as the tires climb up next to the canopy that could explode at any moment. Muhuai's heart stopped instantly. I stood on the scorching hot fuselage, pressed my small face against the murky canopy, and looked at the blood-covered uncle inside. I gently patted the glass. "Uncle, don't be scared. Muji will open the door for you." In my eyes, this wasn't cold, hard steel at all. This was a seriously injured big bird. All the blood vessels in its body were blocked, especially at its neck. A mass of red energy was tightly tangled, tied into a dead knot. It hurt so much. I furrowed my brow in sympathy. The next second, I raised the small iron spoon in my hand. I just need to untie this knot. I didn't pull those complicated levers, nor did I try to break the glass. I just reached out my small hand and felt for an inconspicuous hydraulic pressure relief valve behind the canopy. There was a small screw there, but in my eyes, that was where the energy flow was most severely blocked. Ting, ting, using my small spoon with a strange rhythm, I tapped the metal casing 3 times, one light, 2 heavy, like knocking on a door. This seemingly childish action immediately created a miracle. I only heard a clunking sound, a dull clunk from inside the plane. The lockpin, which had been warped and jammed by the high temperature, miraculously loosened, and a puff of white gas hissed out. The canopy slowly popped open a crack. It's open, the ground officer below's jaw almost hit the floor, the fire axe in his hand clattering to the ground. That was the deadbolt system. The Sukhoi Design Bureau was most proud of, famed for not loosening even in a crash, was tapped open by a child with a spoon. Muhuai had just rushed to the foot of the ladder and caught me with one arm as I almost slipped. She was drenched in a cold sweat, and the arm holding me was also trembling. "Mommy." I lay in Muhuai's arms, pointing at the still-smoking plane, his eyes sparkling. "This big bird is so pretty. I want to raise it." Muhuai looked at my innocent face, then at the ferocious war machine. Her throat went dry. "Raise it? Son? Do you know this thing? Couldn't be paid for even if you sold me?" Just then, the cockpit canopy opened completely, and the medical staff rushed to get the pilot out. The moment the pilot was placed on the stretcher, he groggily opened his eyes, glanced at me in Muhuai's arms, and mumbled deliriously, "Was that an angel knocking just now?" The next second, in the hangar, top secret hangar 1 of base 091, the air was filled with the faint smell of engine oil and burnt material. The Heisha fighter jet that had narrowly escaped death was resting quietly on a giant lift platform. Dozens of experts in white lab coats surrounded the fighter jet, all of them frowning and looking glum. Leading them was an old woman with graying hair, Academician Wang, a titan in the country's radar field. She held a magnifying glass to inspect, the scorched red dome, her whole body trembling. "It's over. It's all over." Academician Wang was in extreme distress. "The Cassegrain antenna is completely burnt out, and the core chip has melted into a puddle. This is the very essence of the Su-27. Without it, this plane is as good as blind. Ma'am, can we replace it with a J-8's radar?" an assistant asked cautiously. "Nonsense." Academician Wang's eyes widened. "The power difference is tenfold, and the connection protocol is completely incompatible. Unless the Soviets come to fix it themselves, this plane is a write-off." The entire hangar was plunged into despair. They had struggled so hard to get one, of the world's top prototype aircraft, only for its core component to be damaged. All the scientists wanted to bang their heads against the wall. Just then, an ill-timed crunching sound echoed from under the plane's wing. It was the sound of someone biting into an apple. Academician Wang frowned and turned her head, only to see me sitting on a toolbox, swinging my short legs and munching on an apple. At my feet was a scattered pile of screws and a few dismantled missile racks. "Whose child is that?" "Those are missile racks. How can you sit on them like a chair?" Academician Wang's blood pressure shot up. Muhuai stood tall behind me like a guardian deity, her expression calm. "Academician Wang, please calm down. This is my son, the base's special grade advisor." "Advisor?" Academician Wang laughed out of anger. "A 4-year-old advisor? Crazy, Mu. There's a limit to spoiling your child. This is a national treasure, not your son's toy." I swallowed a piece of apple, accurately threw the core into a trash can 10 meters away, then hopped off the toolbox and walked to the front of the scorched plane. I tilted my head and looked for a moment, then pouted disdainfully. This big round dish was no good from the start. "What did you say?" Academician Wang was stunned. I drew a circle in the air with my finger. "It's so stupid. The light keeps bouncing around inside, spinning until it makes you dizzy. Plus, it's cross-eyed so it can't see straight." Academician Wang was startled. The phrase "bouncing around" that I used, could it be referring to the Cassegrain, the antenna's complex reflector structure? Before she could think it through, I had already turned around, facing the adoring crowd behind me. The intern technician waved his small hand. "Sisters, go to the canteen and bring the iron box for steaming buns here." "The iron box for steaming buns?" Academician Wang was bewildered. 10 minutes later, when several soldiers carried in the high-power microwave oven, the only one in the canteen, Academician Wang was completely floored. "What are you going to do? Are you going to heat up food on the plane?" I paid her no mind, took a screwdriver, and with heartbreakingly skilled movements, within 3 minutes, I had taken the poor microwave oven apart into 8 pieces. I pulled out a heavy porcelain object from inside and nodded in satisfaction. "This one is strong. Next, I pointed to a corner of the room to a pile of old electronic components, and the glass tube from behind that old TV too. For the next 2 hours, Academician Wang's worldview was mercilessly trampled upon. She watched helplessly as I, a 4-year-old child, assembled things like Legos, taking the microwave's magnetron, the old TV's high-voltage pack, and a pile of scrap metal and putting them together. I had no blueprints, nor did I use any measuring tools, just connecting the wires by feel, muttering to myself. The red wire is afraid of heat. It has to take a detour. The green wire likes to go in circles. This is crazy. Completely crazy, Academician Wang muttered. This circuit will explode the moment it's plugged in. She rushed forward to stop me, but was stopped by Mu Huai. Let him be. Mu Huai looked at my focused face, her gaze resolute. I trust him. Academician Wang roared. This is destruction of state property. If anything happens, I, Mu Huai, will answer for it with my life. Just as the two were arguing, I suddenly stood up, wiped the grease from the tip of my nose, and gave a bright smile. It's done. The big bird's new eyes are finished. Now the thing installed inside the plane's radome was no longer the bulky pot-lid antenna, but a strange array of hundreds of small honeycomb-shaped metal pieces. Each metal piece was something I had, sanded down by hand from scrap metal, looking infuriatingly ugly, like a clumsily patched-up honeycomb. What the hell is this? Academician Wang's hands trembled with anger. This is the new radar you made? And this thing see ghosts? I blinked my big eyes and said seriously, it can see very, very far away. And it's not cross-eyed either. I don't believe it. I want to test it. Academician Wang gritted her teeth. If the test fails, Mu Huai, you can wait for your court-martial. Test it then. Mu Huai waved her hand. The power supply vehicle roared up. Everyone retreated to a safe distance, afraid this monster assembled from a microwave would explode. Only I remained, sitting on the plane's wing and swinging my legs with an expectant look on my face. Power on, Academician Wang ordered. A low hum of electricity sounded, but the honeycomb didn't explode. Instead, every single hole in the honeycomb lit up with a faint blue glow. Immediately after, the radar screen next to it suddenly lit up. The screen full of static instantly disappeared, replaced by a scanning image so clear, it was astonishing. Not only did the screen show the terrain around the base, but even an eagle flying tens of kilometers away was clearly visible. What was more terrifying was that the power meters, needle shot straight to maximum, letting out a beeping overload alarm. How is this possible? Academician Wang pressed her whole body against the screen, her eyes about to pop out of their sockets. This is an active phased array. Moreover, it's a fully digital array. She suddenly turned her head, looking at me, sucking my thumb on the plane's wing, her voice trembling as if she were about to cry. Can a microwave really be modified into a radar? I tilted my head. Grandma, you're blocking the screen. There's a Peppa Pig on it. It's the startup screen I drew. Everyone looked closely, and sure enough, in the center of the radar scan map, the high-precision target identification cursor had really been changed by me into a pink pig's head. The whole place fell silent. Only Mu Huai burst out laughing. I told you my son was brilliant. It seems our canteen will have to buy more microwaves from now on. Mu Huai's deafening laughter echoed across the tarmac, but the surrounding atmosphere was frozen solid. The hands of aerodynamics expert Qian Wei were trembling. She stared at the monstrosity parked at the end of the runway. The fighter jet, which originally had elegant lines, now looked like a squashed lump of clay. The nose had been flattened, fitted with small, incongruous canards, and the paint on its body was a dull gray, with visible brushstrokes. The most absurd part was that the radome was stuffed with the magnetron I took from the canteen's microwave. Regiment Commander Mu, this is no time for jokes. Qian Wei stomped her foot impatiently, her gray hair a mess in the wind. This is completely inconsistent with the aerodynamic layout. The center of gravity has shifted too. Once it takes off, it will definitely stall and spin out. Lai Ying is our best test pilot. We can't let him go on a suicide mission. Mu Huai stopped laughing, but a brilliant light shone in her eyes. She looked down at me in her arms. I was currently fiddling with the buttons on Mu Huai's collar, oblivious to the tension around me. Mu Jay, tell Grandma Qian, can the big bird fly? I looked up, my big eyes blinking, my expression obvious. Of course it can. I raised my chubby little hand and drew an exaggerated curve in the air. It'll fly up with a whoosh. It's in a good mood right now. It says it feels much lighter, and it even wants to dance. Qian Wei's jaw dropped, looking at this crazy mother-son duo, and could only sigh in the end. In the cockpit, Ai Ying Zhaogang's palms were sweaty. He looked at the wires on the control panel that I had rearranged, some parts even wrapped with adhesive tape. He took a deep breath and touched the suicide note in his chest pocket. Control Tower number 01 requests takeoff. The tower commander's trembling voice came through the headset. Takeoff authorized. Be careful. If you notice anything wrong, eject immediately. Zhaogang gritted his teeth and pushed the throttle forward. Boom, the engine let out a strange roar. It wasn't a sky-tearing screech, but a low, powerful sound, like the growl of a prehistoric beast. The fighter jet began its takeoff roll. Qian Wei covered her eyes, not daring to watch the impending tragedy. Everyone's heart was in their throat. However, just as the fighter jet had rolled less than 200 meters, the heavy fighter, which usually needed nearly 1,000 meters of runway to take off, suddenly pitched its nose up. Without any warning, without any transition phase, the gray fighter jet was lifted straight off the runway as if by an invisible hand. Vertical takeoff, a true vertical takeoff. The fighter jet, at an almost vertical angle, roared as it tore through the sky. Holy shit! The normally refined head of the radar department couldn't help but curse. Hearing the astonished shouts, Qianwei shot her eyes open, only to see that ugly plane, now like a sharp silver sword, stabbing straight into the blue sky. What is this thrust-to-weight ratio? Is this still the old engine? Qianwei's knuckles turned white as she held the binoculars. Even America's newest F-15 can't do this. This isn't scientific. The command room was dead silent, then erupted in disbelieving sobs, but this was only the beginning. A roar from Zhao Gang, his voice breaking with excitement, came through the headset. Regiment Commander, it's so light. This plane is too easy to handle. I feel like it's a part of my body. I want to try a high G maneuver. As he finished speaking, the fighter jet in the sky suddenly halted its high-speed ascent. Immediately after, the fuselage reared back, the whole plane like a cobra raising its head, with the fuselage and the direction of flight forming an incredible 110-degree angle. The Pugachev's Cobra maneuver. In this era, this was a legendary maneuver. Moreover, after completing the maneuver, there was no sign of a stall. It transitioned seamlessly into level flight and accelerated. Godlike skill. This is godlike skill. Qianwei's eyes filled with tears, her glasses fogged with moisture. Mu Huai stood on the viewing platform, her back ramrod straight, a grin stretching from ear to ear. She slammed her hand on the railing. See? I told you the Legos my son builds are the best. I had to cover my ears because of Mu Huai's booming voice, pouting as I muttered, Mom, you're so loud. However, just as everyone was immersed in joy, a terrified scream suddenly echoed from the command room. Oh no, the radar signal is gone. Number 001 has disappeared from the screen. This shout was like a bucket of ice water thrown into a pan of hot oil. Qianwei's face instantly turned pale, and she stumbled towards the radar screen. The screen was blank. The brilliant bright dot from before had completely vanished. Did it disintegrate? Did the high G-force just now cause it to break apart? Mu Huai's heart also tightened, but she instinctively looked at me. At that moment, I was unwrapping a piece of white rabbit milk candy and putting it in my mouth. My cheeks puffed out, my expression calm. No! The big bird is playing hide-and-seek with the clouds. Mu Huai immediately calmed down, grabbed the radio, and roared. What are you panicking for, everyone? Get your binoculars and look! Use your eyes! Everyone snapped out of their daze, rushed out of the command room, and raised their binoculars. Against the blue sky and white clouds, the gray fighter jet was weaving through the clouds, still frolicking, still there. The plane's still there, damn it, it's still flying. The head of the radar department collapsed to the ground, a dazed expression on his face, muttering. The plane is still there, but the radar can't see it. This is stealth. This is full-spectrum stealth. He suddenly jumped up, grabbing the person next to him by the collar like a madman. Do you know what this means? It means our radars are all blind. It means this plane can fly over the White House and take a dump, and they wouldn't even notice. The entire area fell silent once more. This time, it was shock. The kind of shock that makes your scalp tingle. The kind of shock that makes your soul leave your body. That paint, which had been slathered on like whitewash, was actually a world-class stealth material. This was black technology that even the American Empire was secretly researching and developing, yet it had been brushed on by a 4-year-old child like me with a ragged brush. Half an hour later, the fighter jet landed safely. When Zhao Gang jumped down from the plane, his legs were still shaking, but his expression was as fervent as a religious devotee. He hurried over, and in front of everyone, faced me as I was eating candy, and snap, he gave the most standard military salute. Little Chief, thank you. To have flown a plane like this once in my life, I, Zhao Gang, can die without regrets. Startled, I shrank into Mu Huai's arms. Mister, your face is so red. Just then, Qianwei and the chief radar engineer led a group of experts rushing over like a horde of zombies. They didn't even glance at Zhao Gang, but rushed straight to the plane's fuselage. The chief radar engineer tremblingly reached out to touch the paint, but feared he might damage it, his meticulousness more gentle than when touching his newborn granddaughter. Don't move! Nobody move! Qianwei yelled, shielding the front of the plane. This is a national treasure, a top secret. Seal this plane off immediately. No one is to approach without my order. Instantly, dozens of pairs of blazing eyes turned towards me in unison. A look so intense it would make a starving wolf cry. Oh, Mugi! Qianwei forced a crooked smile, a notebook in her hand. This stealth coat for the plane, how did you make it? It must be some kind of complex, nanowave-absorbing composite material, right? What's the formula? Did you use rare earth elements? All the experts held their breath, pricking up their ears, afraid to miss a single word. This was a priceless national secret. I tilted my head, looking at this group of strange old ladies, and pointed my little finger towards the canteen. It's right behind that big house where they cook. I thought the black soot on the bottom of the pot was very pretty, so I scraped it off, then added that sticky water and the sparkly rock powder that Mu Huai picked up and mixed it all together. The entire place was dead silent. The wind blew a tumbleweed across the tarmac. The notebook in Qianwei's hand fell to the ground with a thud. She felt like she had spent her entire life studying for nothing. She picked up the notebook, dusted it off, and took a deep breath. Muga, I know you're smart and like to joke, but science is serious. That soot from the pot, it's the element carbon? That's correct, but how can it be used for stealth? That's like saying you can use mud to make an atomic bomb. It's just too absurd. However, before she could finish, I was already squirming impatiently, wanting to be put down. You're so silly, Grandma. I pouted, a look of disdain on my face. If you don't believe me, I'll take you all to see. Mu Huai suppressed a laugh and set me down. All right, esteemed experts, since the chief engineer has spoken, let's go to the scene and take a look. And so, Base 091 witnessed the strangest scene since its establishment. Leading the way was me, skipping along, a 4-year-old child, followed by Mu Huai, a regiment commander with 2 bars and 4 stars on her shoulders, carrying a pink water bottle. Behind them was a group of high-ranking figures with graying hair and thick-rimmed glasses, and at the very back, a fully armed platoon of guards. This grand procession finally came to a halt at the back door of the base's #1 canteen kitchen. It was currently meal prep time, and the chubby cook, Sister Lee, was stir-frying vegetables with a large spatula. When she suddenly saw so many chiefs burst in, she was so scared her hands trembled, and the large spatula almost fell into the wok. Greetings, chiefs, today. We're having braised pork today, but it's not ready yet. Sister Lee stammered her greeting, but Qianwei had no mind for braised pork. She hurriedly asked me, Where are your ingredients? I navigated familiarly behind the stove and pointed to a large iron pot in the corner, waiting to be sold for scrap. The bottom of the pot was pitch black, caked with a thick layer of grease and grime. This is it. I squatted down and took out a small watermelon spoon from my pocket. A piercing scraping sound rang out. With practiced movements, I scraped from the bottom of the pot a pile of black powder. The experts' faces were all twitching. Isn't this just carbon residue? Isn't this just unburnt soot? I placed the black powder on an old newspaper, then pulled down a container of superglue that had been sitting there for who knows how long. The container was covered in dust, clearly expired. This water is very sticky, though it smells a bit bad. It can hold the black powder tight, I muttered as I poured the glue into the black powder. Finally, I pointed towards the Gobi Desert outside the door. Last time Mu Huai took me to pick up rocks, that sparkly kind of rock, I smashed it into powder. With that, I took a paper packet from my pocket. Inside was some mica-like mineral powder. Add this too, and mix it well. I took a pair of disposable chopsticks and stirred the black goop on the newspaper. A sticky, gooey thing, his movements as casual as if he were kneading mud. 5 minutes later, a pile emitting a pungent odor, a jet-black paste-like substance was born. It's done. I tossed the chopsticks aside and clapped my hands, looking at Mu Huai with an expression eager for praise. Mom, these are the clothes for the big bird to wear. Qianwei's hands trembled as she used tweezers to pick up a bit of the mud and placed it into the portable spectrometer. All the experts gathered around, holding their breath as they stared at the small screen. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, the device beeped. Qianwei pushed up her glasses, leaned close to the screen, and the next second, her eyeballs nearly popped out of her head, her whole body trembling violently as if electrocuted. How can this be? This carbon crystal structure. This is a perfect honeycomb wave, absorbing structure, and there's also this mineral powder. Under the catalytic effect of the glue, it has formed some kind of electromagnetic wave trap, a wave absorption rate of 99.9%. Oh my god, is this a formula from God? The chief radar engineer snatched the analyzer, glanced at the data, and his eyes rolled back in his head. He almost fainted. We've been researching stealth materials for 10 years, spending hundreds of millions, and the result was in this broken pot. The scene immediately descended into chaos. A group of elderly experts went wild, rushing towards the discarded large iron pot. Quick, go check the composition of this glue bucket, even if it's expired. We must find the manufacturer. And those rocks, quickly send people to the Gobi Desert to collect rocks. Gather all of those sparkling rocks. The chubby cook, Sister Lee, cowered in the corner, watching the group of usually profound and inscrutable leaders fighting tooth and nail over a broken pot. This world is so surreal. Mu Huai looked at this scene and couldn't help but burst out laughing. Mu Huai squatted down and wiped the black soot from my face. Son, you're truly Mom's lucky star. I blinked my eyes and pointed at the frenzied group of old folks. Mom, are they hungry? Why are they fighting over that dirty pot? Mu Huai ruffled my hair, her tone filled with immense affection. They're not hungry. They have met a deity. But just then, a communications officer rushed into the kitchen, panting. Regiment Commander, urgent call from the capital. It's the commander's private line. Mu Huai's expression turned serious, and she picked me up. This was serious. At this moment, in the command room of Base 091, the atmosphere was 100 times more tense than during the test flight. That red secure phone was like a roaring monster, letting out a series of urgent rings. The hand of the communications officer holding the receiver was trembling, cold sweat from his forehead trickling down his cheeks. Regiment Commander, it's really the commander's private line from the capital. The chief said he wants to hear your report personally, and he wants to talk to Chief Engineer Bai Ling Diao. However, the aforementioned Mu Huai had absolutely no time to pay attention to that phone that symbolized supreme authority. She was squatting beside the sofa, her face full of worry, holding a towel-wrapped ice pack in her hands. And on the sofa, the little chief engineer who was so imposing just moments ago was now curled up into a small ball, crying until his little face was flushed red. Mom, it hurts. I clutched my right cheek, tears falling like beads from a broken string. I'm losing my baby teeth. and after several days of being exposed to the Gobi Desert wind and eating too many milk candies, my gums became inflamed, causing a high fever. Seeing me suffer, Mu Huai's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. There, don't cry, Mom's here. Let Mommy blow on it for you. It hurts. I don't want ice. I cried even harder, my little hands flailing, knocking the ice pack to the ground. Regiment Commander, the chief is still waiting. This is the highest order. Political Commissar Zhao Gang stood, pacing anxiously nearby. What are you rushing for? Can't you see my son is in pain? Mu Huai suddenly turned her head, her eyes as fierce as a mother tiger protecting her cub, scaring Zhao Gang into taking a step back. The phone's ringing continued, like a life-claiming talisman. Mu Huai took a deep breath and snatched the receiver from the table. This is Mu Huai. Mu Huai's voice was cold and hard, carrying a suppressed anger. From the other end of the line came a steady and dignified voice. Comrade Mu Huai, I heard you all have done something big. I want to hear. Chief Mu Huai directly interrupted the other party. This shout made everyone in the command room hold their breath. Chief, I've had the secretary finish the report. It will be faxed over shortly. I can't go into detail with you right now. My son is losing his baby teeth and he's rolling around in pain. When he cries, my mind goes completely blank. I can't remember any of the parameters. Whatever it is, no matter how big, it will have to wait until I've soothed my son. That's it. I'm hanging up now. Without the slightest hesitation, Mu Huai slammed the receiver down onto the phone. The entire command room fell into a dead silence. Political Commissar Zhao Gang's mouth hung open, his jaw nearly hitting the floor. The communications officer's legs went weak, and he knelt right on the ground. She hung up. She actually dared to hang up the commander's call, just to soothe her child. If this were ancient times, this would be defying an imperial edict, an offense punishable by beheading. Regiment Commander Zhao Gang tremblingly pointed at Mu Huai, unable to speak for a long time. But Mu Huai acted as if nothing had happened, turning to pick me up. No more crying, no more crying. Mommy hung up that noisy phone. We won't pay them any mind. Mommy will take you to find something yummy. How about some soft cake? I sobbed and nodded pitifully. I want to eat something sweet. Okay, we'll eat something sweet. Mommy will go make it for you right now. Mu Huai strode out of the command room with me in her arms, leaving behind a room full of petrified people. At the same time, in the capital thousands of miles away, in an office with a giant map hanging on the wall, an old man held a disconnected receiver, stunned for a full 5 seconds. The secretary beside him turned pale with fear and hurriedly stepped forward. Chief, this Mu Huai is too outrageous. I will immediately request the Northwest Military Region to. Unexpectedly, the old man suddenly burst out with a hearty laugh and waved his hand. Mu Huai, excellent. I just love this defiant streak of hers. She's a woman of flesh and blood. The old man put down the receiver, his eyes full of admiration. If she doesn't even love her own son, how can you expect her to love her country? The more she acts like this, the more it proves how important her son is to her. The old man walked to the window, pondered for a moment, then turned back. That little boy's name is Mu Ji, right? He's rendered a great service this time. I hear it's because of a toothache? The secretary was stunned for a moment, then nodded. From what Mu Huai said, it seems so. The old man gave a kind smile, but his tone allowed no room for doubt. That is a hero of our nation, our precious treasure. A toothache is no small matter. Notify the Ministry of Health, assemble the best pediatric dental specialists in the country, have them bring the best equipment, and immediately fly directly to Base Zone 91. Tell the specialists, if they can't fix this little chief engineer's tooth, even if Mu Huai dares to beat them, I won't stop her. The secretary's eyes went wide, a storm raging in his heart. A special plane for dentists. I'm afraid not even a state guest would receive such treatment. This Muge, what kind of deity is he exactly? 3 days later, in the biting cold wind of the northwest, 3 black-armed helicopters escorted a silver-gray special plane with no markings as it slowly tore through the clouds. The tarmac of Base 091 was under heavy guard. Base Commander Zhao Guobang stood at the forefront, his military posture perfectly straight, but his temples under the brim of his cap were soaked with cold sweat. Old Zhao, do you think that girl Mu Huai has really poked a hole in the sky this time? The political commissar lowered his voice, his lips pale. Zhao Guobang swallowed hard, his eyes glued to the special plane. Poked a hole in the sky? Hanging up on the chief? That's defying orders. That's grounds for a court-martial. Where's Mu Huai? Why isn't she here yet? Zhao Guobang stomped his foot impatiently. She's here, she's here. Regiment Commander Mu is here. Just then, a military jeep slowly drove up. Before the car had even come to a complete stop, Mu Huai jumped out, carrying a small, tightly bundled figure with her. I lay on Mu Huai's head with teary eyes, my expression utterly listless. Mu Huai, you're truly reckless. Zhao Guobang saw this scene and almost fainted on the spot. This is a reception for the chief's inspection. What kind of decorum is it to bring your child? Commander, Mugi has a toothache. Only when he rides on me is the ride a little less bumpy, so he won't cry. Before Zhao Guobang could get angry, the cabin door of the special plane slowly opened and an invisible wave of pressure immediately enveloped the entire scene. First, 4 female bodyguards in sunglasses with cold expressions and dressed in black. Next, an old man with graying hair but a vigorous spirit appeared at the doorway of the aircraft stairs. Qin Ting, the stabilizing pillar of the military world. Zhao Guobang immediately puffed out his chest and sucked in his stomach, shouted, "Attention! All the officers and soldiers saluted in unison, their movements perfectly synchronized. Only Mu Huai, she didn't move at all, because I was lying on her head, my small hands tightly gripping her ears. Mu Huai could only salute the old man with her eyes. This, at a reception ceremony with its strict military discipline, was utterly and completely out of place. Qinting walked down the aircraft stairs, his gaze sweeping over everyone, finally coming to rest on me, who was on Mu Huai's head. The old man's footsteps stopped immediately. The scene was deathly silent. Half of Zhao Guobang's heart went cold, just as he was about to step forward and accept the blame at that very moment.